The leader of the federal Conservative Party not one to mince words when talking about former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And although Trudeau is no longer in power, Pierre Poilievre continues to share his thoughts on the former Liberal leader's track record. Joining us now is our Parliament Hill correspondent Glen McGregor in Ottawa. Glen, Poilievre is now not just questioning Trudeau, but the RCMP.
Yeah, this is sort of an interesting development. I think we've got to, before we talk about this, let's rewind the tape a little bit here, Faiza, back to the election campaign. Remember, Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative leader, was put in sort of an awkward position because he had to really disavow Trump, which has suddenly become the U.S. Canada's relationship with the United States, and the tariffs that Trump had imposed became the dominant issue and allowed Mark Carney to win the election campaign. Since then, there's been an expectation that Poilievre might pivot his tone. He might try and take some of the rough edges off, present sort of a more amenable, nicer, open tone, and back away from some of the comparisons that some people have made to his policies and, crucially, his style to Donald Trump. Poilievre has disavowed that. He says, listen, I'm nothing like Donald Trump. He's rejected this Maple MAGA label that some people have put on him. But in the recent weeks, he really seems to be leaning in, at least stylistically and to a certain extent on policy, of some of the things that Donald Trump has done. He has called for, and his party has called for, an end to birthright citizenship. That is, people who were born to foreign nationals but born on Canadian soil automatically get Canadian citizenship. That's something that Donald Trump eliminated, and he tried to eliminate in the United States. There's still a constitutional challenge of it almost immediately after his inauguration. Now, Poilievre is pushing the same policy. Poilievre also tweeting out something this week about diversity, equity, inclusion, saying it has to stop. This was a major issue for Donald Trump, especially with the universities in the United States going after them, threatening to cut off funding if they used any of the money to support DEI programs or DEI-related staff in their universities. Now Poilievre saying he'd like to do that. And now he's basically advancing this theory about, during a podcast interview that he did recently, about the RCMP, alleging that they are essentially covering up for past Liberal governments. Listen to what he said on this podcast.
Many of the scandals of the Trudeau era should have been involved jail time. I mean, Trudeau broke the criminal code when he took a free vacation from someone with whom he had government business. It's just like, it's right there in the criminal code. If the RCMP had been doing its job and not covering up for him, then he would have been criminally charged. And again, he probably violated the criminal code in the SNC-Lavalin scandal. These would normally have led to criminal charges, but of course the RCMP covered it all up, and the leadership of the RCMP is just, frankly, just despicable when it comes to enforcing laws against the Liberal government.
So let's unpack that a little bit. The leader of the official opposition calling Canada's National Police Force despicable, alleging that they were trying to cover up crimes that he believes were likely committed by his previous opponent, Justin Trudeau. And he's referring in those remarks to two separate cases. First of all, the SNC-Lavalin affair. Remember, the Justice Minister, Jody Wilson-Raybould, eventually left cabinet, and she had alleged that she was unfairly pressured by a guy named Jerry Butts, who was Justin Trudeau's principal secretary, to offer kind of a sweetheart deal to a major Quebec engineering company called SNC-Lavalin, trying to get them to accept sort of an admission of guilt, but with no criminal liability or civil liability involved. So the RCMP did look into this allegation, found that there was no evidence there to lay criminal charges at the time. It was later investigated by the Federal Ethics Commissioner. He said Trudeau had breached ethics rules. He came to the same conclusion about the other case that Poilievre is referring to. That's when Trudeau, on a Christmas holiday, took his family down to Barbados to visit a private island that is owned by the Aga Khan, the leader of the world's Ismaili Muslims. Again, in that case, the ethics commissioner did find Trudeau had breached the ethics rules because he was essentially accepting the gift of a free helicopter ride from the place where the government of Canada plane landed to the island where he and some friends and family spent some time. But again, no criminal charges were laid at the time. The RCMP looked at it, decided it wasn't worth it. Yet, Pierre Poilievre is saying that they are despicable and essentially accusing the police, Canada's National Police Force, of essentially a political cover-up. Yesterday, as it happens, Prime Minister Mark Carney was doing an event in Toronto with RCMP officers in the background because he was announcing the hiring of 1,000 new RCMP members. And the commissioner of the RCMP, Mike Duhane, was there. A reporter, quite rightly, asked about Poilievre's comments. This is what the commissioner had to say.
I think we've talked about SNC-Lavalin quite a lot under the previous government, and I think it was clear that there's no interference. I don't take any orders from any political individual. And as far as his comment with regards to senior management, I would invite M. Poilievre to meet with us and to meet with the people who run this great organization.
So there's the commissioner offering to meet with Pierre Poilievre to discuss his allegations further, but the commissioner also rejecting those allegations, saying just not true. So what to make of this? I mean, it looks like Poilievre, yes, he did pivot in his tone, kind of, reinvented himself a little bit, but not in the way everybody was expecting. He's become sort of leaning into these policies, as I say, stylistically and at the policy level, that will likely draw more comparisons to Donald Trump and not fewer of them. The thing we're going to be looking forward to is that upcoming leadership review for the Conservative Party. Does something like this hurt Poilievre in that race, or does it hurt him? Does the fact that he lost the election campaign, lost his own seat in the Ottawa area by kind of campaigning with this sort of hardline approach, does that hurt him when members vote whether or not he should stay on as leader? We're going to see when that review happens, Faiza, in January.
Okay, much more to come. Our Glen McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks so much.